So after the last investigation, you're probably thinking, that's great, but I don't have a compressed CO2 canister to test this out. Is there anything that I can do to test this relationship between CO2 levels and the pH of water? Well, of course there is. You just got to remember we need to find another source of CO2. And you have one that you carry around all the time with you. Actually, it is you. Remember back when we did cellular respiration and we talked about how you release CO2 as the gas, as a waste product of cellular respiration when you're converting that sugar into usable energy? So you always have CO2 available, you just have to breathe out. So we need to find a way to collect that CO2 and introduce it to our water. Now, you do have to remember that I'm not breathing out 100% highly pressurized CO2 like this machine here. So we may not see as a strong reaction as we did with the compressed CO2, but hopefully we'll be able to see something. So the first thing I need to do is find a way to collect this. And the way that I decided to do this is I got a balloon, because I'm pretty good at blowing these up, or we'll see how good I am. And I connected this to a tube and used a rubber band to tie it on very tightly so the air can't escape. So the first thing I need to do is collect some CO2. And before we start, I want you to notice that I do have a small amount of water in this container, so we can see what our baseline data is. And if you can see here, our pH of the water is much like it was when we started with the last experiment, about 7.2. It's actually exactly 7.29. So let's get some CO2. Okay, maybe I'm not as good as I said I was. Okay, that's about as much as I can do by myself right now. So as you can see, this would be a much better experiment to do as a group because you could have several people blowing up balloons to provide enough CO2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kink this hose so I don't lose any, just kink the vinyl tubing, and I'm going to introduce the tube down into the water. Now before I release it, I'm going to indicate that my software should start collecting data. So it's going to start with the pH where it is, and it's going to show if there's any change. So here we go. Store last file, and it's going to graph it actually into the different lines so we can see what the comparison is, whether we get as large a drop in pH. I'm going to suspect probably not, because I am not as, I don't have as high a concentration of CO2 as our friend SodaStream over here. So let's go and see what we get. And you can see the bubbles going in, but because this is not airtight, it's not got the same amount of pressure, and it also is going to have a lower concentration of CO2. So I'm trying to keep in as much of it as possible here. And as you can see, we haven't had that much of a drop yet. It went down from 7.28 to 7.2, so it did go down a bit, but nothing like what we saw before. So let's see if I do this again, if I can get it to drop even more. And so you can see now the benefit of doing this as a group project, because your lab partners could be blowing these up as I was collecting data. So I'm going to tell this to collect again. Append the latest. And here we go. Let's see if we can get anything worse. And actually I do see a slight decrease starting to happen. We're down to 7.16. So certainly not the reaction we were seeing before, and certainly not as quick. But we do begin to see a slight drop in pH. All right. So let's try one more time and see if we can get it any lower. Okay, let's pinch it off so we don't lose any of that. Snake it in, and let's go again. Now it's interesting to note that while the pH is getting slightly lower, we are not technically acidic yet. It is still above 7, which is neutral. So even though we are becoming more acidic, it is not creating an acid. All right. So there we go. We only got down to about 7.12. So as you can see, it definitely, we're not getting the same level of drop as we did before. If we scale our graph, let's see if we move this guy out of the way, we can see, while we did run the experiment for much longer, we're not getting nearly the same amount of drop. We only got about 0.14 of pH drop there. So while it is affecting it, we're not getting as strong of a result. And of course that has to do with the concentration of CO2. As the concentration of CO2 goes up, you're going to have a stronger reaction, and the water is going to become more acidic. The less CO2 we release into our atmosphere, the less acidic, the less of a reaction that we're going to have. So this explains why when scientists talk about reducing CO2 emissions, what the effect would be. If we can reduce those CO2 emissions, even though we might be getting some effect, we're not going to get the same degree of impact on the ocean water.